Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I am here with some exciting Battlytics news. I've updated Battlytics, it's true. I didn't change the engine, because I still want to be able to compare apples to apples over time, but I did update the screens. I've added some new visualizations, hopefully to make it a little clearer to understand, and also added some additional benchmarks so that we can compare and contrast against the hundreds of mechs that we've analyzed, so you can get a better idea of where the particular mech we're talking about fits in. So you're going to see all that. Very excited to show it to you tonight. Mastodon D. This thing's a monster. I played it recently. It was in an Alpha Strike game. It was disgusting. I wanted to see how it fared in Battlytics on the classic side. So let's dive in, shall we? So the Mastodon D was built in the ilClan era, 3131 it was produced by the Rosselhag Dominion, or Clan Ghost Bear, as I like to call them. So this thing's a 95-ton clan assault mech, has an eye-watering battle value of 2,961. It's slow as turds. It moves 3.5. It doesn't jump. It does have a Clan XL Fusion engine. Decent dissipation, though. 30 heat sinks in total, so 15 double, right? It can dissipate 30 points of heat. It has ferrofibrous armor, 100% coverage, 293 pips. But the real thing I want to call out here that I'm excited to see how it fares is the reinforced internal structure. So the way that works is it does two things, basically. One, every pip of internal structure can take 2 damage. So essentially you're doubling your internal structure. Second, what it does is when you roll to confirm a critical hit, you subtract 1 from that roll. So it makes it harder to generate critical hits. And that's a big deal. So it's definitely a Mastodon. Implacable, I'm hoping. But we'll see when we get to the defensive sims how this thing survives. Because it is literally a walking bomb. We'll talk about the weapons and ammo that this thing carries. It's got literally 100 LRMs on it. It's got 2 LRM-15s in each arm. It's got an LRM-20 in each side torso. And then rounding out, it's got 2 Clan medium pulse lasers, which are very good, by the way, in each arm as well. This thing carries a ton of armor. Each LRM-15 launcher can, I believe, 16 rounds per LRM-15 launcher, and then 12 rounds per LRM-20. So it's definitely well fed. The good news is it does have case 2, but I mean, there's literally ammo everywhere. And I feel bad for the pilot if you get like a chain reaction ammo explosion, because you could theoretically end up knocking out the pilot. But the case 2, again, certainly helpful in that regard. Speaking of arms, a couple of things. One, it's only upper arm actuators, so you can arm flip and fire 4 LRM-15s or those medium pulse lasers, or all of the things behind you, which I think is kind of cool. It is slow, but again, 360-degree firing arc for a big majority of its weapons is a very, very good, counter to that lack of speed. The other thing I want to call out, it's just interesting, just from a rules perspective. So as we know, clan mechs get case everywhere. That means the arms have case, the legs have case, the head, everything has case. When you add case 2 to a clan mech, it only goes in the locations that you added. Everything else still has, original OG case, if you will. So that was all factored into the simulations that we're about to take a look at. So guys, strap in, relax. We'll see how this one goes. Mastodon Battlytics coming right up. All right, so here we are with the offensive benchmarks. A little bit refreshed. I'm excited to show these new visualizations off. Not too much new on the right side of the screen, but that left side, let's talk about that. So the ACD chart is slightly different. I put everything kind of on one chart there. The area chart representing the baseline average calculated damage. That means, from turn to turn, right? So this is a 12-turn, basically, simulation. How much damage does it do? If it doesn't generate any more than 4 points of heat. That's baseline. Red line, on the other hand, is if I smash all the buttons and do everything I can without shutting down. right? So it'll get as high as 29 points of heat, but not 30, right? How much damage can I do? And then the blue line represents optimized, which is where we try to squeeze out as much damage as we can by taking on a little bit of heat here and there. Unfortunately, even though this thing has tons of weapon options, they all do a lot of heat. So we were really only able to gain 3.3% out of this thing when we optimize it. But the good news is the baseline is so high already that, our optimized, increasing by 3.3 is actually significant. Now, if you do try to ride the red line on this thing, you will lose a ton of efficiency. Your damage plummets, as you can see in that chart there. The bar chart there, the second chart down, simply is just heat by turn. So you can see this thing basically can spike up to 29 points of heat, has no problem staying there. Whether you're smashing the buttons or not, you just have to be careful. This is not for the faint of heart, I will say. The optimized damage, if you are patient and careful, you can keep this thing running fairly cool, and only, you can pump it for a little extra damage here and there. But generally, I think you'll find, as we can see in the cumulative benchmark below, you really don't need to push it that hard. This thing does crap loads of damage, even when you keep the heat under control. So this cumulative benchmark, the speedometer looking thing in the bottom right-hand corner, the yellow represents the cumulative heat over 12 turns. How much did it build up, right? And the blue bar represents that optimized damage. Now, the points along the outside represent some hallmark mechs along, that we have looked at, right? So along that outside. So it starts with the Jenner F, right, which is that 4 medium laser Jenner, very basic light mech, does 52.3, right, all the way around to the Direwolf A, which is one of the highest ranking mechs in terms of optimized ACD at 489.5. The Mastodon clocked in at 429.31. That is extremely, extremely high. That's a ton of damage. So, you can just see here by the chart, that's like in the top, 10% basically of mechs. It's very, very good. So if you see a Mastodon, run away. That's the moral of the story. This thing can definitely lay down some fire. Lethality index hasn't changed much. So it's still trying to bring down a Javelin. It did so 100% of the time over 10,000 simulations, and it only took it 5.69 turns to kill. The average time to kill is 10 turns. This is basically having that, which is huge, because it just has so many guns to shoot, and so many missiles landing, so many different damage, like splashing all over the place. So it's doing a very, very good job of bringing light mechs down. Similarly, if you think about how it would do against larger mechs, it's not the thing that's going to punch holes in it, but you pair it with a Gauss boat or something along those lines, this thing will definitely deal a ton of critical hits. 5.15, it's one of the higher numbers that we've seen in terms of the lethality index. So overall, from an offensive perspective, the Mastodon is certainly terrifying. Let's take a look at the defense. Very excited to see how the reinforced structure is doing. I did have to update a little code in Battlytics, which is always fun to do, to add in that reinforced structure. So curious to see how this thing panned out. All right, so here it is, reinforced structure. Survivability is 83.7%, not bad. And before we get into that, let's take a look at the armor diagnostic. So this thing is pretty much, it's pretty much maxed out, right? The only thing is it's got a little bit higher on the center torso and a little bit off the rear, but I don't mind that, right? So normally the rear's over armored by average, right? Because again, I'm looking at a 75-25 split front and rear. This is a little bit beyond that, but again, it still has all the pips. It just favors the front more than the rear, which again, I would prefer anyway, because as I like to say, the battle tends to happen in front of you, and if it doesn't, something has gone horribly wrong. So taking a look at the ammunition analysis here, so left torso, right torso, 45% chance to strike ammo if you get an internal hit. That is very, very high. Left arm and right arm, obviously much lower, because they're only packing a ton of ammo each in those arms, and they're laden down with weapons and things like that. So those side torsos, again, luckily are protected by Case 2. Taking a look at the motive side, only 3.7% loss of, taking a motive hit, basically. So, 4 out of 100 shots, I should say 4 out of 100, hits that actually land on the mech are going to result in, a motive hit, meaning a actuator, foot, lower, upper, hip, anything along those lines. So even though, it's slow, it's generally going to remain slow. It's not going to get any slower. Under sustained fire, it might. But again, this thing can take a beating. It has a ton of armor and a ton of structure. And it does, again, that reinforced structure, reducing the chance that a crit's going to be taken. Very, very meaningful there. So one thing in the center I want to show you that's new is the survivability chart, right? So what I did was I basically trended all of the mechs by battle value from 500 all the way up to 3,000 and beyond, right? And I sort of created this area chart to show, where most of the mechs fall, all right? So the Mastodon being just about 3,000 battle value and the survivability being 83.7%, it's just slightly below that average that we see for mechs of a similar battle value. And again, this thing, it's just, I don't know, it's interesting because most of the deaths are engine deaths, all right? And I dug into that because, again, we've got Case 2, we've got, Clan XL engines, but it's true, what happens is, that is the primary way this thing dies. It has so much, there's so many chances that the ammo is going to pop. There's so many chances there's going to be additional criticals. There's so, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, you're going to land those engine criticals, and the thing is going to end up dead that way. What was also interesting to me was that in a good majority of the simulations, it was actually just engine deaths via the CT. So just coring this thing out over time. So kind of interesting. What you'll find with reinforced structure, and I thought this was interesting, is because, so for example, right, actually by fact, right, this thing has 50 points of armor and it has basically 60 points of internal structure on the CT. That's insane. It's going to take forever to core this thing out and kill it. That's why the CT head deaths are so low. Most of those, by the way, were head kills, because it's just going to take so much time, even with this simulation where it's just dealing 10 points with PPCs every hit. So you will generate crits. You will eventually, you're going to get knocked out of commission by engine more so than anything else. So kind of interesting to see how that worked out. All right, so that's about that on the defensive side. Let's jump into efficiency and see how this thing plays. Now, again, it's very, very expensive. It did a lot of damage, and an 83.7% is very respectable on that curve. So, I don't know. Let's see. All right, and survey says pretty darn good. 9.74 on the chart. That is exquisite, dare I say. So let's talk about efficiency overall. So effectiveness, top left-hand chart there. It's the same old thing. I just revisualized it a little bit to make it a little bit clearer to understand. I thought the double area chart, the way they overlapped, it was kind of hard to see. Hopefully this one, it's easier to see where that purple line pulls away from the blue area. So as the survivability drops, obviously you're losing some damage there. But it's not a ton, number one. And you can see like that first big jump, right? When all the LRMs and stuff get into basically medium range, it's doing tons of damage there. And there's so much area under that curve that it's really putting in the hurt already. So your damage loss is only 6% here overall. And, your net change from baseline is only minus 2.8%, right? So we went up 3.3% for, optimizing it, and then basically dropped 6%. So at the end of the day, it's not a huge change, which is a great thing. Now, efficiency, let's talk about the efficiency chart. So there's two things here, right? One is the bell curve. That's the top mountain, if you will, the top purple mountain, right? That's the bell curve of all known mechs that we've ever analyzed, right? And where they fall, right? Irrespective of, weight or BV, or well, BV's factored into it, but it's basically just how many mechs were at this efficiency number, and it builds that bell curve, right? So you can see this thing, obviously, 9.74 is phenomenal. The bottom, the black area chart, is specific to assault mech. So it's specific to mechs in its weight class, right? So if we look at a medium mech or a light mech, that black area, right, will change and adjust based on, that shadow, if you will, underneath, right? That'll change. So you can see most of, it's interesting, like there's like almost two peaks, right? The one bell curve, most assault mechs are sitting in that, maybe 7 to 7.2 area. But then there's like a whole bunch of assault mechs that also are in that 10 plus area. Thanks, clan assault mechs. And honestly, it is all the clan ones. It's weird. Like, all the clan ones are ridiculous, as we know, because you can pack so much crap in them. It is what it is. So this guy, right, this Mastodon D was a 9.74. So excellent in its peer group and excellent overall. Gunnery sensitivity on this mech, it's interesting. It's 0.653. I'd like to say the average is around 0.7, 0.75, maybe a little higher than that, but 0.65, it's not very high because, again, so much of your damage is dependent on rolling good on the cluster hit chart. And obviously you'd still need to land the LRMs, but you have a ton of them. And again, it's sort of that like dice casino on the cluster hit table that's really driving this more so than gunnery. So what you'll see in the sort of that the efficiency sort of chart there, at gunnery 2 it's 9.74, which is where we do all of our tests. That's its primary efficiency score. As you increase gunnery, right, it'll go up a little bit, all the way up to 10.6. As you reduce gunnery, it drops down. If you played it at gunnery 4, it's still 7.96, which, again, going back to the shadow chart, right, it is above its peer group. So if you wanted to try to get away with a cheap Mastodon, you might be able to. If it were me, I think I would play this thing at gunnery 3. Gunnery 4 is just too much for me. Like the long range penalty, trying to hit a fast mech, I don't like it. Gunnery 3, I think, is reasonable. You can get away with that for 3,500 BV or so. That's not too bad. All right, so talked about efficiency, talked about gunnery sensitivity. Hopefully you like that new visualization there on the left. I think it's pretty cool. And again, like as we review different mechs and different classes, you'll see that sort of shift and change. Although, spoiler alert, I think the next couple ones are all going to be big, juicy mechs. So it'll be interesting to see how they compare in terms of that. Now, let's talk about battlefield roles. Let's talk about threat. So let's see how this thing goes on the tabletop. All right, so I picked 2 roles for this thing. Now, the role evaluation, I added some additional icons here. I did change the name of 2 roles, actually 3 roles, because I think they were causing confusion. So basically, cavalry became strike. I think they're synonymous in my brain, but hopefully for some people that clears it up. Vanguard I changed to frontline because I think Vanguard was confusing. And then, there was Picket, which also was, sort of conceptually made sense to me. It was always a comment, like the conversation in the comments that I had to have when I selected it. So I just changed it to Scout. And I also really revised the visualization on the right of that to kind of show, in my opinion, what I think are highly valuable traits, valuable traits, sort of neutral traits, and then things you don't really need to care about. So, for example, in a defender, I don't care about mobility. Survival is paramount, and I really want it to be able to fight at all ranges effectively, right? So, it's got 3 green up arrows at close, mid, and long. It's got a big up arrow at survival, and then a red arrow at mobility because I don't care. Speaking of defender, that's where I think the Mastodon D would shine. You can stick it on an objective. You can stick it on a base. It can reach out and touch just about anything with its range. And if things decide to get close, it does have those clan medium pulse lasers, which are very, very effective. I believe they come in at 12 inches, which is phenomenal. And again, they have that -2 benefit to gunnery, which is terrific. Fire support is a no-brainer for this mech. Obviously, you've got 100 LRMs. Why not? So those are the 2 roles that I picked for the Mastodon. On the threat assessment side, just a reminder, this thing does have a 360-degree arc of fire with everything except its 2 LRM-20s. That's really, really good. So the threat assessment chart really hasn't changed much. I changed the heat line to bars just so everybody understood that there was a discrete sort of, again, we're analyzing the threat at every range. This is not like a continuous analysis, right? It's not a simulation. It's just how much damage can it do and how much heat can it possibly build up, right, in a trigger pull at this range. What's amazing is this thing can, if all of the dice landed, which they never will, maybe they will, but it'll only happen once in your life. It could do 114 points of damage. That's crazy. I mean, it's an insane amount of damage. It's almost half the armor on this mech it can do in damage. Now, of course, it's never going to do that. Its peak ACD, which is when we factor in the dice gods, is 66.4. And that's happening at 4 inches. That's the closest it basically can get when the pulse lasers are at the best range. And so that's where that peak ACD comes in. So you'll notice, though, the Alpha Strike is fairly consistent. You have that 100-point Alpha Strike potential all the way up until the medium pulse come into range. But your ACD, your average, when the dice gods are involved, right, it's obviously much harder to do that damage. So your ACD cap is 58.3%. That means you're expected to do about 58.3% of the total damage. So, for that, when your LRMs are all in range, right, you're still doing 58-ish damage per turn on average. That's pretty darn good. So that's the Mastodon. I love it. Efficiency is great, 9.74. Battle value is extremely high, but it has this sort of fire magnet, like distraction, Carnifex, I don't know, type of vibe to it that I absolutely love. I will tell you, in Alpha Strike, it's hilarious just because it has so many freaking pips. But in Classic, it looks like a tremendous amount of fun to play, minus all the rolling on the cluster hit table, of course. But, such is life in Classic BattleTech. I love the new Mastodon model. It's an Ironwind Metals model. It's recent. And, I have some models that I love from Ironwind, the old Battlemaster, the old Highlander. There's some really, really good ones. The Mastodon is a new one. It's absolutely phenomenal. Like, I can't even say enough good things about it. I bought it on like, like one of those things where, like, I guess I'll try it. I primed it. I painted it up. It came out absolutely great, in my opinion, of course. So I was really, really happy with the way it came out. Very paintable, very, very good. Ironwind Metals Mastodon is a must-have if you don't have it. Again, my opinion. So if you want to get a Mastodon, you can get it over at Aries Games and Minis. That's where I got mine. That's my number one source for all things BattleTech. Books, dice, minis, everything. Terrain, you can head on over there. Decals, paintbrushes, check it out. You won't be disappointed. Also, guys, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe if you have not subscribed, and then leave another comment. Tell me what you think about the Mastodon. Have you ever used it? Have you ever even heard of it? What variant do you love the best? The Prime is pretty interesting. Twin ER PPCs and Twin Streak LRM 20s. But I'm a fan of this one, but I want to hear what you think about that. Also, if you want to get more involved in the channel, you can head on over to Patreon. It's as little as $1 a month, and that really helps us, keeps us motivated, keeps the lights on, keeps us, funded over here, because this stuff doesn't happen for free, unfortunately. So thank you to all of our patrons who help us bring you phenomenal BattleTech content. But that's it, guys. I'm all done marketing. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you enjoyed the new look and feel of Battlytics, and hopefully, again, that like speedometer chart and some of the shadow charts, it gave you a better idea of, where the Mastodon fits in amongst its peers. But that said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.